Close your eyes and imagine
the new regenerative,
socially just
and sustainable food system
that serve the well-being of people and the planet.
COVID-19 has revealed some unfortunate shortcomings
and is exacerbating the vicious cycle of poverty and food insecurity.
For all the devastation the pandemic has brought,
this global transition represents an opportunity
for us to change the world.
We believe it's even more important now than ever to build and support
indigenous people,
the role of war,
refugees and host communities,
our young leaders
together.
Unity in vision requires unity in action.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to wherever you are in the world. I'm Natalie Becker-Okovic, and I'll be hosting this global dialogue. I'm a co-founder of Thought Leader Global, and we do storytelling around people and organizations having a positive impact. And through our work, I'm an advocate for community health. And that starts with ensuring that everyone has access to nourishing food. I'm thrilled and excited and happy and inspired to be part of today's event. Now, on behalf of our co-hosts, EAT and the Rockefeller Foundation, I'd like to join and welcome each and every one of you, and thank you for joining us to reimagine food systems beyond COVID-19. Our program today will take a hard look at what we are up against. We will look at the street-level perspectives on COVID's damage to the food system. From there, we will explore clear plans and actions to back a more nutritious, sustainable, equitable, and resilient food system for the world post-COVID-19. And there will also be food. We've got two great chefs who are going to be talking through easy recipes for cooking at home. That means you can not only watch along, you can also cook along wherever you are. Now, this is an important piece of information coming up next. It's the hashtag for today's event, and the hashtag is Food Systems Action. We encourage you to use it. We'd love you to chime in to the conversation on social medias. That hashtag Food Systems Action will be on the bottom right hand of your screen throughout the broadcast. Now, to reimagine food, we must capture the diverse values that we each bring to the table, that we each represent. We are so lucky to have a truly global audience here with us today, with thousands of people representing 126 countries. And we want to hear from everyone. We'd love to hear from each and every one of you. And to do that, we're going to ask you to go to sli.do.com. All you have to do is enter the event and use the code Food Systems Action. In Slido, you'll be able to submit your thoughts and ideas. You'll be able to answer questions and polls throughout today's program. That is slido.com, and enter with the code Food Systems Action. As you answer, leave your hat on, come as you are. Respond as a mother, a father, a son or a daughter, as a CEO or a head of a UN agency, as a farmer, a grocer, a scientist, an activist. All answers are welcome and all your answers are valued. So we have a few questions and challenges in store for you. Here is the first. Please use Slido to share the words that best describe the future of food, or the food future that you imagine. I'll repeat that. Use the words rather in Slido to best describe the food future you imagine. Now it is my absolute pleasure to welcome an inspiring person. His name is very familiar to you. If you have been watching Quarantine Kitchen for the past couple of months, his Instagram videos are very popular. He's an inspiring food leader. And with no further ado, please join me in welcoming chef patron of Osteria Francescana. He's also the founder of Food for the Soul, and his name is Massimo Bottura. Massimo, welcome.
Thank you, EAT. Thank you, Rockefeller Foundation. And, you know,
there we go.
Can you hear me?
Go right ahead.
Hello?
Go right ahead, Massimo. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, It. I don't know what's going on, you know. I'm so sorry. Thank you, It and Rockefeller Foundation. Today, I'm sitting here at my dining room table with you, and actually, we are sitting here together. This is the place where I share meals with my family. This is also the place where I read, I write, and I pull my thoughts together. Behind me, in my background, perhaps you can see, there is a painting by the Italian artist Sandro Chia. This artwork, like so many others on the wall of Restaurant Osteria Francescana or Casa Maria Luisa, in Modena, is not here for decoration, but it's a window into a landscape of ideas. Chia painted the teacher figure with 5 apprentices, 5 colorful bears learning about color and light. I often think about the fact that an artwork provokes. There is a before and after when you encounter a work of art. Think about the first time you saw Guernica by Picasso. You read Dante Alighieri's Inferno. We are different before and after we encounter these masterpieces. Art opens pathways into other worlds. Art is a window, it's a landscape, it's a bridge. Today, I'm different than yesterday because of what I saw, heard, read, and what I ate. When I think about moving forward behind the hurdles of the pandemic, beyond the health, social, economic problems caused by COVID-19, I think about the little bears learning about color and light. The pandemic has humbled us and forced us to see how fragile our system and structure can be. We in the food industry, we in the industry, we chefs, restaurateurs, we artisans and farmers, we policymakers and bankers, we citizens of the world, from the moment on, we all have a new responsibility to rebuild with beauty, light, color, and dignity. I close my eyes and I imagine beauty. Rosso Fiorentino Renaissance painting, Robert's Indiana love sculpture, or the Ode to Joy by Ludwig van Beethoven. I hear the piano of Thelonious Monk, the lyrics of Bob Dylan, and the depth of Bessie Smith's voice. When I'm without words, I open a book. I read Langston Hughes and Gertrude Stein. Albert Camus said, "Beauty, no doubt, does not make revolutions, but a day will come when revolution will have need of beauty." When we closed our restaurant on March 9th, I didn't know what to do. My world was turned upside down. And then I returned to the stovetop and I began to cook. Not in my restaurant, not for any guest. I cook at home with and for my family. I cook away my sorrow, my losses, my tears. I cooked until the darkness passes, and I began once again to see colors and light. Renaissance came after plague, revival and rebirth after death. There is no time for tears because we have already cried. There is no time to shake our heads because we have already asked too many questions. Leonard Cohen sings, "There is a crack in everything. That is how the light gets in." Today, we need more than ever before color and light. The time has come to paint, to cook, to write, to sing, to harvest, and to stand up, to teach and to take apprentice under our wings. We can create a world where hunger is no more. We can reduce food waste, but first we need to squeeze tighter to make room for everyone at the table. There are no more excuses. We crunch the numbers, we make charts and diagrams, we measure and count, but at the end of the day, nutrition is not mathematical, it's emotional.
Massimo, thank you so much for those great and inspiring thoughts you have shared with us. We can see why you are the founder of Food for the Soul. You certainly have spoken to all of our souls, reminded us to be in touch with beauty, to seek inspiration in the everyday, and to, out of this crisis, find the beauty and the way forward. So thank you so much for joining us and for your inspiring and wonderful words. Massimo will be keeping an eye out and will be watching the space of Quarantine Kitchen. Massimo Bottura, patron of Osteria Francescana and founder of Food for the Soul. Now, we are absolutely delighted to share that we'll be joined by Idris Elba and Sabrina Dhowre Elba. They are both Goodwill ambassadors to the United Nations International Fund for Agricultural Development, and they have stepped up tremendously to address the COVID food crisis. Hear what they have to say to you in just a moment.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Eat. We are so thankful to be here with you all, hosting a global digital dialogue on food systems at such an important time in our history, during a pandemic and during a time when our planet is in crisis.
Wait, you told me we were going online to talk about going to eat something.
No, I said we are speaking at Eat tonight.
I'm joking. Honourable guests, it's an honour to welcome you all to the Eat event, Reimagining Food Systems, Driving Action for a Post-COVID.
Like many of you, we are concerned that hunger is rising and that our global food systems may break under the weight of COVID-19.
Yes, and to fix any system, it's about collective action. People are waking up. Things are shifting worldwide like we've never seen before. Talking about food and hunger is also like talking about equality and justice and raising our consciousness to a new way of being and taking care of each other post-COVID. It's about our food, but it's also about the people on our planet.
We understand that if poor farmers can't get food to the marketplace, it impacts their livelihoods, but also the rest of our global population who eat that food. This is why we need our leaders this year to take action and invest more funding in food and agriculture through IFAD and many of the EAT partners, as we could see a significant rise in hunger and poverty that will affect millions of people.
We care about food and food issues because it's really about people who grow food, eat food, sell food, who are impacted by how our food is grown and consumed. Really, it impacts all of us.
We saw this firsthand when we visited rural farmers in Sierra Leone. Lack of food and poverty can be the problem, but food, farming, and fair supply chains done in a sustainable way that helps the planet can be part of the solution.
That is why we are happy that you are all here. The experts are converging here today to look at the solutions and how we can fix our food systems.
To everyone watching online that is new to this issue like us, please stay engaged, speak up, talk to your leaders on why it is vital we empower rural people and transform our food systems.
Thank you, Eat, and looking forward to a great discussion and help move this issue forward together.
Bye, all.
Bye.
Thank you, Idris and Sabrina, for your inspiring words and for using your platforms to effect impactful change. As you said, it is important for all of us to stay engaged, to speak up in our communities and to speak up to our leaders in order to help move the food systems agenda forward. Thank you for your wonderful contribution. Now, let us hear from one of our co-hosts of today's event, Dr. Rajiv Shah, the president of the Rockefeller Foundation.
Thank you, Natalie, and thank you to Gunhild and the EAT Forum team for bringing together so many voices across sectors, countries, and continents even, to reimagine the food system for a post-COVID world. I also want to thank Massimo, Idris, and Sabrina for their inspiring words and commitment, and for partnering with us on so many efforts to make the food system accessible with dignity to those who otherwise suffer. This is a time of unprecedented crisis for the global food system, as COVID-19 has exposed and exacerbated its many vulnerabilities and injustices. The ongoing pandemic has seen precious food wasted, while people are going hungry. It's seen meat processing plants closed as many of the workers there have gotten sick. It's seen the disruption in seasonal employment for millions of farm workers here in the United States and around the world. And it's led to the types of food export bans that we know have traditionally been strongly associated with increasing, not decreasing, levels of hunger, malnutrition, and human suffering. So one consequence of this health pandemic, COVID-19, is in fact a food pandemic, a hunger pandemic. Worldwide, 300 million children, including 30 million kids here in the United States, are at risk of losing their school meals, which they often rely on as their main source of calories and nutrition. As the World Food Program has highlighted, the number of people experiencing acute hunger around the world could reach 265 million more by the end of 2020, more than double what it was last year. And more than 7 million more children may see their growth, learning, and potential stunted by the hidden hunger caused by chronic malnutrition for those who are otherwise vulnerable. I've seen firsthand what these numbers mean. To a family in Florida whose children go hungry even as their parents desperately seek help, going from food pantry to homeless shelter. To a child in Afghanistan so deprived of food and the energy to hold up her own head that the anger of that injustice tears apart a community and perpetuates violence. To a family in India that struggles to access food markets due to COVID lockdowns, social distancing, and the new protocols that minimize the number of people who can get access to markets that are desperately necessary to help their family get the food they need. We at the Rockefeller Foundation were founded on the principle that hunger is a moral failing in the modern world. One of our earliest commitments more than 100 years ago was to bring together science, industry, government, communities, and farmers to solve hunger once and for all. In the United States, today we're helping partners feed vulnerable children and families across more than 1,500 school districts and communities, providing more than 1.7 million meals a day to those kids who desperately need it. Throughout sub-Saharan Africa, we continue to work with our great partners, including the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, to help African governments transform their food systems, create credible food balance sheets, work to design smart markets so that food markets can be open and accessible even during a COVID health crisis, so that African families can access the food they need in a healthy and consistent way. COVID has shown us how fragile and inequitable the modern food system has become. But we also see that even for those who get enough calories, and were getting enough calories before this crisis, our global food system is the number one cause of preventable sickness, morbidity, and mortality from diseases like cardiovascular disease, hypertension, and diabetes. And that's why we're here today, because we believe today's crisis, brought about by a health pandemic that's caused a hunger pandemic, can actually be an opportunity to drive through desperately needed changes that can make our food system more equitable, more nourishing, and more sustainable for a climate and a planet that is in fact in crisis. Our task is not just to respond to the immediate challenges of the health pandemic, but to understand that this is a moment when we can actually create larger, systemic, and more thorough change. The Rockefeller Foundation led a green revolution more than 50 years ago when it seemed like our food system would leave hundreds of millions of people behind and mass starvation would be a commonplace event. It wasn't. We were able to tackle that challenge working together. Well, today we call for a renewed revolution, and we all have to do the work to make sure we change the way we produce food and absolutely transform the way we consume food in every community across the planet to meet the crisis of the moment and to prevent the crushing burden of chronic disease that our current food system will cause if we don't make these changes. Let's do this work together. Let's do this work now. Thank you for your efforts to create a more equitable and a more just global food system.
Dr. Shah, thank you for those inspiring words and for the work that the Rockefeller Foundation does in tackling these very important issues that affect us all. Keywords, we do it together and we take action now. Now we are welcoming Emmanuel Faber, who is the CEO of Danone. And Emmanuel will be chatting to us for a perspective from the business community.
Hi everyone. As we gather this year, let me first thank the EAT Forum and the Rockefeller Foundation for organizing such an impressive and critical virtual dialogue. The past 3 months have been totally unprecedented for us at Danone and of course for me as a human being. Never before had our generation felt so vulnerable, so dependent from each other, so fragile in our beliefs and in what we thought were our strengths. The GDP of many of our countries will shrink probably double digits this year. And there is already huge pressure to seek to get back to the 2019 GDP peak as ASAP and at virtually any cost. I think this would be a huge mistake. These expensive short-term fixed measures would be sunk costs, as both demand and supply will be durably affected by the presence of the virus. And as all of us have been deeply, consciously or unconsciously, impacted with the discovery that our ways of living simply ignored that we rely on nature, that we rely on life to exist and to thrive. So with GDP per cap possibly going back 10 to 15 years, I think we should pause and think of this crisis as a warning sent to us from the future. So if we were back to 2005, what is it that we should be doing to avoid this from happening now? What are the ways of living, producing, consuming, the ways of eating, and that we should adopt to change course? What is the alternative path? The fundamentals of any resilient system is to preserve its non-renewable resources and to not pressurize its renewable resources beyond their regeneration ability. And GDP growth is not going to guide us on this course, because this is the very indicator that led us to where we are today. Over the last 50 years, the correlation is 98% between oil production, CO2 emissions, and GDP. And agriculture has today a CO2 footprint which is equivalent to the whole of industry. But unlike industry, which cannot put the emitted carbon back into the oil pit where it belongs to start with, agriculture has this unique and magic ability that it can sink carbon back into the soil, and it should, to ensure soil future health. So our future food system absolutely needs to embark carbon sinking, so that while driving planetary diets more plant-based than today, we also engage in regenerative agriculture practices fostered by market mechanisms to monetize this carbon. At Danone, we've decided to publish this year our financial earnings post full scope CO2 emissions costs, and our earnings are cut by half. But in GDP and in IFRS accounting standards, resources come for free. The future food system cannot rely on a flawed model that assumes that natural resources are unlimited and free. Colorado River is so salty because of agriculture that when it reaches the Mexican border, it is desalinated, and yet it is then dying before reaching the sea on overuse again in Mexico. Is there really no cost to that? Chennai in India, 6 million inhabitants, the last few years had several weeks of day zero, no water on the tap, riots in the streets, rush to bring the water by tanks on trains pumped from aquifers hundreds of kilometers away, depriving farmers from their irrigation water. Is there really no cost to this? We speak a lot about wild species disappearance and loss of biodiversity, and I cannot agree more that it's an incredible loss. But the missing link is the battle for biodiversity in the cultivated, domesticated biodiversity, agriculture. Is there really no hidden cost or risk to rely on only a handful of plants that we know well for 3/4 of human food? And what about the loss of domesticated biodiversity? The progress of artificial insemination in the 70s radically changed the picture. From a few hundred insemination per bull, we went to 50,000 or more direct descendants. So last year, University of Pennsylvania found that in the DNA of a 60,000 US cow sample, there were only 2 Y chromosomes from 2 bulls from the 60s. Is there really no risk? So of course there is a need to reimagine our food systems, big time. Of course there is a need to price and value what we wrongly call externalities, as they are now the core of the resilience of our food systems. And we fail to recognize this in our models and indicators. I would actually add that the COVID crisis has obviously shed light on the indispensable work of the frontline workers of our food systems, and that includes farmers. And there is no way that we can build resilient food systems without decent revenues for all of them. As I have already emphasized in the past, food systems will even need to be a foundation for both social and climate justice. My hope is that the food revolution that started already for a whole generation, rich or poor, young or old, a generation which does not take food for granted anymore, which is questioning the way they eat and they drink, will be even more pushing and demanding for a change. In many ways, this will lead to an interdependent but relocalized food model. There are huge tailwinds for this: political dynamics, environmental reasons, civil society, consumer appetite for localization. If instead of being uniformly relying on global choices, pushing for mono food styles, mono agriculture models, mono species selections, our food systems are clustered. They will by design embed the urgent task of rebuilding agricultural biodiversity, the missing link. And these multi-local food cluster systems will be much more resilient as a total. So let me now speak about the last very difficult topic, the next frontier. We know that maximum intensity, zero diversity agriculture is a factor of pandemics. That just in time does not account for just in case. And if we truly want food security through a resilient multi-local system, we as an industry should accept to discuss what is a taboo today: food safety. So let me break the taboo for once. Our food safety dogma led us to a food system that is not living anymore, lifeless. We want to eradicate the part of life we don't like to a point that there is no life anymore in our food. The quest for global food safety through global standards is a dramatic factor of killing biodiversity and killing life. For instance, the use of seeds that are naturally mutating in the field is largely forbidden, whereas this is probably one of the safest and most affordable ways of ensuring the local adaptation of plants to drought and climate change through nature-based solutions. And on the other end of the cycle, the same goes with due dates in the fridge or in the pantry. If we want to drive down food waste to protect natural ecosystems, people need to be educated about food so that they can make informed judgment on how safe it is when they open the pack, beyond relying on the label they read. From working in livelihoods all over the world, urban and rural, I'm convinced that there will not be food security without an accepted, conscious, shared food safety risk. Today, people are fundamentally looking for food sovereignty. On this quest, many are prepared to take what we call food safety risks on their own. Let us realize that this is exactly what they're doing when in many countries they increasingly buy bulk. They go shopping in open markets, directly from local family farmers, or they grow their own herbs or a few tomatoes by themselves on their balcony or community gardens or whatever. To consider this reality as a fact and its opportunities for biodiversity and resilience, we have to accept to cross the bridge back to reality from the illusion that brands can and should guarantee 100% food safety and that it is the ground. It's not. Any resilient system will have to be one where brands truly, genuinely reconnect people with the reality of the food, with transparency and fairness. I guess the power of our brands will be a power to serve. This will radically change the way our brands will interact with their ecosystems. They have started, but it's only the start. We need the force of a collective to drive this change. And this is why I'm so grateful for the work done by Eat Forum and to continue to walk the revolutions with all our partners. So to finish, thank you for your commitment to change. We need your leadership more than ever. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Faber, for sharing your perspectives and your leadership in driving forward food systems action in the business community, reminding us also that food systems can be the basis for social and climate justice, and also to look at those taboos and to challenge dogma. So thank you for your contributions. Well, now we'll be talking about the many forms of food systems action today on our planet. And we'll start with one that is relevant, really, to every person on the planet, cooking delicious food at home that reflects our culture and nourishes our community. So, without further ado, I am pleased to introduce you to our first chef today, Chef Alejandra Schrader.
Hello, my name is Alejandra Schrader, and I am a plant-based certified chef based out of Los Angeles, California. I am also a proud founding member of the Chef's Manifesto, and I am here to showcase the queen, the Venezuelan arepa. The arepa is made with a pre-cooked white corn flour, just mixed generally with salted water as a way to enhance it with a lot of nourishment, a lot of good for you stuff. I add some chia seeds, some flax seeds, as well as a little bit of ground oats. This just cooks for a few minutes and it can be eaten by itself or filled with a variety of fillings. Venezuelan food lends itself so much to sustainability. First of all, we love to embrace the use of fruits, vegetables, seeds, nuts, and also because of the situation right now, a lot of people have been forced to start utilizing ingredients that are traditionally thrown in the trash, like banana peels. I use the banana peels, I boil them first, and then I cook them with a sofrito that had onion and anise or fennel, as well as some spices like smoked paprika, cumin, and turmeric, all delicious, right? And that allows me to create a meaty texture filling for the arepa that also is packed with nutrition, with fiber, potassium, and many good things. This arepa I'm serving with a slaw made with chayote squash, a mango, and also some purple cabbage. I added a little hint of jalapeno and lime juice just to brighten all those flavors up. This slaw I'm also serving with what we call petit pois, right? Like the small green beans, which are so sustainable, and they are great cover crops. They help infuse nitrogen into the soil, so they are fabulous plants to consume and support. Another arepa that is very popular is the domino arepa, which is made with black beans and traditionally cheese, white, black, like a domino. But because I am plant-based, I am serving my domino arepa. First of all, it is made with black turtle beans, which are one of the future 50 foods. They're great for our health and they're phenomenal for the environment. And instead of putting cheese, I have soaked overnight some cashews. Hello protein, hello, the originally plant-based protein. And I've mixed them with the black beans just to enhance and also create that illusion of the black and white. I'm also serving this with an aquafaba aioli. So something that normally gets thrown into the trash, no more waste. We're making it into a delicious aioli to serve with our arepa. This arepa also has some microgreens from a local farmer. I am so excited and so proud to showcase Venezuelan food and to demonstrate that it is a great vessel for sustainability and for planet-friendly food. I'm excited now to hear from my friend all the way across the pond in India, my friend Megha, who is going to showcase how to make an India paratha.
Well, that looks absolutely delicious. Thank you, Chef Alejandra. And thank you. We look forward to seeing what Chef Megha is going to be sharing with us a little bit later during the show. So make sure you stay tuned for that. And you can listen along, you can watch along, but you can also cook along. And now let's return to the food systems visions that you all shared. Okay, so we have received over 500 responses from you. They are wonderful, optimistic visions, and of course we have much work to do to achieve them. The number one result we got was nutritious, was a word that you shared with us. Regenerative came through really strong as well. We also have resilient, 129 responses on food, should be local, it should be equitable, 130 responses on that. Food should be accessible and should be wasteless as well. So wasteless come across really strong. But the most important word from you on reimagined food for the future was nutritious. You want it to be nutritious. So thank you so much for sharing your wonderful and optimistic visions with us. We have, of course, much work to do in achieving them. But as so many of our speakers have said so far, it is great if we do it together, and it's easier if we do it together. COVID-19 has exposed the many flaws and the weaknesses and the vulnerabilities in our global food system. The next portion of our program, we will really delve into the challenges that we're experiencing around the world at every step, from the farm to the plate. But amidst these challenges, we have also seen some bright spots that point to the future. And this is what we want you to share with us. So tell us in Sli.do the following things. What experiences from this time give you hope? It could be that you've rediscovered a love of cooking for your family. Maybe you have helped a neighbor who has become a friend, or advocated an important policy change to support your community or your workplace during the pandemic. Whatever it is, we would like to hear from you. And while you're sharing your stories, we'll hear dispatches from 3 leaders on the front lines of the COVID food response in Kenya, the US, and Colombia.
Since the COVID pandemic hit us in these parts of the world, part of the measure was to restrict movement of people. So this limitation of movement also affected the food availability. So we had an immediate impact of food shortages, and so we saw an immediate price hike. Even the variety of the various foods in the market was affected. When you look at the food systems here in Kenya, we have a problem with the food supply chains. We don't have proper infrastructure in the market. So high food wastage and food loss is one of the things that is happening in the markets. Most of our markets are very congested. So even to ensure that there is social distancing is a problem. We have other partners who are rethinking these food market solutions, and we are thinking about a market in the future that is infrastructure that allows the food to be presented in clean and very hygienic environments, but even more importantly, markets that will have facilities that also reduce wastage, reuse, and get the waters being harvested, that uses solar energy to power the markets, and that also ensure that the waste coming out of the markets is collected, is recycled, produces energy. These are the smart markets of the future.
The COVID crisis shined a bright light on long-standing issues in the U.S. food system, a food system that was grown out of the poisoned soil of systemic racism and exploitative capitalism. There's a laundry list of things that I could name, but from where DC Green stands at the intersection of food justice and health equity, what's clear to us is that we as a society need to be investing in food as medicine. The mortality rates from COVID among our Black and brown communities were astonishing, but they weren't surprising. They are the direct result of disinvestment from communities of color, lack of access to healthy food, and the underlying conditions of diabetes and diet-related chronic illnesses that go along with it. We saw in this country our school systems stepping up to meet the challenge, but even there, the chronic disinvestment from these societal supports meant that the food that is being served at our schools is also not actually nourishing our people. It's time for us to meet this crisis and see what it's unfurled for us. The need to truly invest in systems that bring food as medicine to all our people.
At YFAM, we have been promoting agricultural education amongst our followers for over 5 years. COVID-19, however, has really literally pushed them over the edge to literally start planting something, right? So what did we do? Right, we responded by being able to provide seedlings, seeds, soil, and materials to plant in, such as pallet grow boxes, for those folks who have been really following our message online, right? We provide these seedlings at a very affordable rate so that everyone can actually afford it and go to their backyard and, as we say, plant your plate. So we partnered with CARDI, that's the Caribbean Agricultural Research and Development Institute, to donate seedlings, not any kind of seedlings, sweet potato, healthy seedlings, right? From a very generous farmer I came from in central Trinidad, to donate almost over 1,000 seedlings to new planters as well as farmers within the community and environs.
The Plant Your Plate community is an online platform where beginner farmers and farmers could share their gardening tips, tricks, and advice. It was created in response to the COVID-19 situation, where a lot of persons began gardening but didn't have a clue about what to do. In this community, persons share their advice about how to deal with this and how to plant their garden, as well as barter their goods and crops. We have over 100 members. Over the past month, we've seen people sharing their excitement for gardening, and it's growing enormous. This kit was created in response to the COVID-19 crisis, and farmers or gardeners were presented with a variety of seeds that they can now grow in their garden to secure their plate.
You know, shout out to YFAM and the ability to really always be unique, whereby you are now guaranteed fresh produce without having to come outside. So within the remits of quarantine and stay at home and be safe, you are also now being healthy. One more than that you could ask.
I once said on an interview that, you know, the COVID-19 actually created an opportunity for people to become more food conscious as to where their food comes from, and not just accepting from where it comes from, but to be able to create your own food at home in your garden. So again, this is YFAM. We look forward for all your support. Don't forget, and it's not too late, to plant your plate.
The messages from our leaders on the front lines, also joined by Trinidad and Tobago. Well, you may be familiar with the Food Systems Vision Prize, an invitation by the Rockefeller Foundation for organizations across the globe to develop a vision for regenerative and nourishing food systems that they aspire to create by 2050. We'll hear more about the prize later in today's program. For now, we will focus on some of the visionaries developing these inspirational ideas. The Vision Prize semi-finalists were announced in March, so let's hear from a few of them about their experiences of the COVID crisis.
The pandemic we now face has exposed the fragility of our food economy.
Our interconnected world and current food system is actually very vulnerable for outbreaks like this.
Huge vulnerabilities exist when food has to travel long distances to get to our stores.
The COVID-19 restrictions on travel has intensified an already food system for my people. Transport is a huge barrier and options for healthy food is limited.
It has pushed many more people into starvation and left millions without livelihood opportunities. While there's an abundance of food surrounding the city, it has been difficult to get food to those who need it most.
The pandemic is exacerbating the vicious cycle of poverty and food insecurity. This puts greater pressure on the ecosystems that support the rural poor.
And the failures don't only affect everyday people, as we've seen in the supermarkets, but also the businesses that are running restaurants and purchasing ingredients for the hospitality sector. We've seen farmers dumping milk, harvests being left unpicked, but at the very same time we've seen lines and lines at the food banks.
So we've seen the food bank almost immediately having to service 2 times the amount of people that they otherwise did.
While food insecurity rates were already high, they have increased exponentially since the COVID-19 unemployment crisis hit.
People lost their ability to work the land, produce their own food and vegetables. They're completely reliant on government handouts.
Inordinate reliance on the public distribution system has destroyed the local economy, and people suffer from shortages and diseases.
It has really pulled back the curtain on our epidemics of chronic disease.
And then, of course, loneliness is a big issue and aggravated through COVID-19.
COVID-19 has highlighted a need for increased resilience across all of our systems, and the food system needs to be at the heart of that.
We can co-solve for the pandemic and the triple crisis we find ourselves in now: a health crisis, an economic crisis, and an environmental crisis.
We aim to create a mutually beneficial culture for the health of both people and nature.
We see an opportunity in this to create jobs, restore ecosystems, and provide nourishing food for a self-sufficient Lebanon.
The Canadian prairies.
Brazil.
The Salish Sea.
In New York State.
Galapagos.
Chicago.
South Africa.
Hong Kong.
India.
Nairobi.
Amsterdam. Berlin, Brandenburg.
Australia. And the planet.
By 2050.
Thank you to our Vision Prize Visionaries for the work that you're doing and sharing your inspiring messages with us. Now I'm excited to introduce a few of these visionaries who have joined me to talk about how COVID is shifting their work and shaping their direction. They join us now. Dr. Elizabeth Kimani Muragi of Kenya has a vision to restore Nairobi to a place of cool waters. Paul Handley has a 2050 vision for the Treaty 4 territory in Canada. And Veena Srinivasan has a vision to preserve India's rich cultural biodiversity. Veena, Paul, and Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Depending on which time zone you are. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. So we'll dive straight into it. We have some very important questions and challenges to tackle today. This is a question. Elizabeth, I'm going to start with you. Can you tell us about the specific food system where you are active? How has it been impacted by COVID-19, and how have you reacted to the crisis?
Thank you very much. I'm very glad to be in this panel and to talk about my food system. I am active in the Nairobi food system. Nairobi was once called a place of cool waters, and people often refer to it as the green city in the sun. But if you come to Nairobi, you realize that it's not necessarily a green city in the sun. It's not necessarily a place of cool waters. You'll find that majority of the urban residents in Nairobi actually live in slums, and these slums are overcrowded. The place is environmentally degraded, and people live in poverty. Unemployment is very high. High levels of food insecurity in this system. And about half of children growing in the urban poor settings in Nairobi are actually stunted. But in Nairobi, you find that there is a lot of obesity and diet-related diseases across the socioeconomic divide, despite having people who are stunted. And you find that also there is high levels of food, unsafe foods, because of the food. Majority of people consume food that comes from rural areas, and this food has been often is grown with agricultural chemicals, harmful agricultural chemicals, and they are not used safely. So there is a lot of food unsafety in the urban poor set in Nairobi in general. the COVID-19 pandemic has actually made the situation worse. Food insecurity has gone up because there are restrictions, and so many people, especially in the urban poor settings, have lost their jobs because many businesses have closed, and also because food supply from rural areas has been affected. So there is limited supply of food from rural areas, and this has meant many people in Nairobi are not able to access safe food and to access adequate food, and the urban poor are majorly affected. So prices have gone up and quality of food has gone down, and for school children are no longer in school, so school feeding programs have been stopped. And so many children who depended on school feeding to actually have a meal are not fed. So there have been social protection measures from the government, by non-governmental organizations, from grassroots organizations. They have been distributing food, cash transfers, but this is not adequate and it's not regular. So people are still hungry. I've received many requests from people asking about whether we can support them to do urban farming, because they think that if they were doing urban farming, they would actually be able to feed themselves, because now they are not able to afford food, or they are not able to access the food. So that's generally what has been happening in Nairobi during this COVID-19.
Elizabeth, thank you so much for sharing that with us and for your insights into how you have been impacted in Nairobi and how you've reacted. We're going to go over to you, Veena. Can you also tell us, in the specific food system you are active, how has it been impacted by COVID-19 and how have you reacted to this crisis?
Right. Thank you for having me. The food system that we've been working on is the Sikkim-Darjeeling region of the Eastern Himalaya. This is a picturesque, hilly, beautiful region with climate ranging all the way from subtropical in the foothills to almost an alpine tundra in the north. And it supports diverse ethnic groups, cuisines, and traditional crop varieties. Now, agriculture in this region was already vulnerable. It's largely rain-fed and unmechanized, and it was vulnerable to climate change, wildlife crop depredation, and fragmented access to markets. And what was already happening was a rapid replacement of traditional crop varieties by cash crops. Mass tourism was another major driver that was making farmers give up farming almost entirely, as tourism brought 10 times the amount of income compared to farming. Now, COVID-19 exposed the vulnerabilities of the food system and the trajectory that it was on. A survey conducted by the Eastern Himalaya office, available at csei.org, showed that many farmers were unable to access seeds and sow the pre-monsoon crop in April. The lockdown that followed cut off access to the wholesale markets in the plains, because the food was being transported from the hills into the plain and then back into the hills, which was a pretty crazy system if you think about it. And as a result of the lockdown, much of the produce ended up being wasted or sold at throwaway prices. At the same time, as tourism revenue disappeared entirely, a lot of the supplemental sources of revenue that the farmers were dependent on also went away. And overall, therefore, the survey showed that 95% of the households reported a very sharp drop in income. And although staple foods were being distributed through local agencies and civil society organizations, many households reported cutting back on fresh produce and having to reduce the number of meals. They still had to go and buy a lot of components of their meals, like spices and oil and so on. And that was really causing them to dip in savings. So overall, COVID kind of caused us to rethink the way we were thinking about primarily looking at responsible tourism as a driver for a sustainable food system, to really start thinking about the system as being more resilient overall and intervening both in terms of local demand and supply, in terms of shortcutting of some of the supply chains, as well as thinking more about regenerative agriculture and conserving the natural resources of the region. So I think that COVID-19 caused us to make a complete shift in our own way of thinking.
Veena, thank you. Thank you so much for that input. Paul, over to you. What has been the impact of COVID-19 where you are, and how have you reacted?
Well, an agri-food system here on the Canadian prairies is sort of a result of the colonial system that was imposed a couple of 150 years ago. And so we've created, the colonial forces cleared off the plains of the ecosystems and the indigenous populations, put them onto reserves, and created this very extractivist industrial type of agriculture. So we have a very small population here and a very large land mass. We produce a lot of food and export it. So it was very strange to go into the stores and find for example, we produce 500 million bushels of wheat in my province every year. I went into the stores, there was no flour on the shelves. And so that was kind of, I felt that the COVID-19 crisis kind of was a warning shot. I mean, generally speaking, we still had lots of food in most areas, but it sort of exposed the brittleness of the system. We export a lot of food, we import a lot of food. What happens when shocks like a pandemic come along, or issues around climate change, other environmental issues or economic issues? We could have a system, with our long supply chains that really doesn't supply what we need.
Paul, thank you so much for that input. There's a question I so want to ask, and I'm going to come to that next. But as a food system visionary, Elizabeth, you are thinking and working to implement a range of solutions. Can you tell us briefly about the one that you see as really promising and that is inspiring you?
Thank you very much. I come to the issue of food systems from a justice perspective, from a human rights perspective, and I believe that everyone should have access to adequate, safe, nutritious food. And the problem we have is that food has been so commodified that it has lost its value. The people who actually produce it are actually hungry because they cannot afford the commodity that they have created. So the one thing that I would want to propose is to for Nairobi, because that's what the food system I'm working in, I would promote urban farming, innovative agroecological urban farming, so that people first feed themselves before they make food a commodity. And I would also propose a food rescue system where excess food, surplus food is actually shared and then redistributed to those who do not have food, so that everyone have access to food. So I would actually make food commons.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Paul, back to you. This is a question I hope we have a chance to ask all of you. But if you could go back and change one thing about our food systems 5 years ago to minimize COVID-19's damage today, what is that one thing that you would change?
Well, I think, what I see out there is that there are a lot of farmers, urban farmers and rural farmers, who are doing really exciting things, creating systems which are much more regenerative, I guess employing the ideas of agroecology to create a more resilient food system. And so what I'd like to, I guess, just see is our policies changing to support that kind of farming. I think payments to farmers, instead of based on typical types of subsidies, could become payments for ecological services, for a different type of agriculture. I think that would be a good way to go.
Thank you so much. Veena, coming back to you. If you could go back and change one thing about the food systems 5 years ago to minimize COVID-19's damage today, what one thing would you change?
Well, I was going to say more than one, a couple of things. I think that there are a number of things we could have done to reduce supply chain disruptions. And I think the first one I would say is community seed banks. So farmers wouldn't have to be dependent on hybrid seeds and not be able to buy them to save the pre-monsoon crop. The second thing is low-cost cold storage facilities at the village level that might have then allowed some of that produce to be to prevented it from going waste and increase its shelf life. And finally, just the existence of local markets instead of this dependence of transporting everything to wholesale markets in the plains and bringing it back. It really showed the vulnerability of farmers and consumers in the hills to supply chain disruptions and lockdowns. So I think those are the three things we would have liked to change, which would have minimized the disruption we see today.
Thank you so much, Veena. And Paul, just to hop back to you on this, can you tell us about the one solution in the range of solutions you're looking at that you feel is a promising one to implement?
Yeah, our vision is focused, I guess, more on the agricultural side. So again, I see farmers out there who are doing really exciting things in terms of reshaping their entire farm landscape to kind of model ecosystems. So reshaping the landscape in terms of adding tree cover, adding ways of managing water systems, crop rotations, much more diversity, and also selling directly to consumers. So this is kind of a very different model than the colonial model, the industrial model that really shapes most of our agricultural system. And I think it's much more resilient, brings better nutritious food, and really addresses, I think, the questions we're going to be facing in the future.
Thank you, Paul. Now, Elizabeth, over to you. 5 years ago, if you could go back, what thing would you change to minimize the impact of COVID-19? If you could change one thing about our food systems 5 years ago, can you think of one thing you would single out that could make an impactful difference to how we are experiencing COVID-19 today?
Okay, if you allow me, because I answered that question, could I answer as to what we plan to do?
Yes, please, your solution. Thank you, Elizabeth, and apologies for that.
Yes, so I want to see in the coming years, by 2050, I want to see Nairobi a healthy, beautiful, food secure, environmentally friendly place. So our solutions, we have two core solutions. We have several solutions, but I'll talk about two. One is urban farming. We want to do innovative agroecological farming in Nairobi. We know that the projections are that in 2050, Nairobi's population will triple. And the rural people living in rural areas, I mean, the rural areas will reduce because Africa will actually be more urban than rural. So we need to actually continue the culture of farming. The African culture of farming should not be lost through urbanization. We must return it. So I would want to promote that to ensure people have food, and we create jobs in the food system. And then, because a lot of food is wasted, I would want to promote a food rescue system whereby any excess food that is in the system can be actually recycled or can be redistributed so that those who don't have food can actually be able to access food. So I would promote a circular system of production and recirculation of food. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, Vina, and thank you, Paul, for your insights, your incredible solutions to these great challenges that we face within food systems. Now, given the time we have left, I'm going to ask you to answer one question, one final question. I'm going to start with Vina. Vina, what gives you hope that we can build a 2050 food system that is not only more resilient, but that is also more equitable, sustainable, and nourishing? Briefly, can you tell us?
Sure. So I think a resilient, equitable, sustainable, healthy future, it necessarily means a diverse portfolio of foods. I think that's what COVID has shown us, a combination of local and global, strong local food economies, even as we stay connected. And this requires two things that give me hope. First is during COVID-19, I think a lot of people have just sat at home and thought about food and cooking. And a lot of people have been forced to think carefully about what the industrial food system and the homogeneity of food and look for local substitutes as imported supplies become scarce. And there's been a lot of interest in local cuisines and cultures and reviving them. The second thing that really makes it possible is the promise of technology in scaling diversity. So the industrial and green revolution were agents, I think, of promoting homogeneity through economies of scale. And what the information revolution is allowing us to do is to actually scale heterogeneity. You see platforms like Airbnb, TripAdvisor, Uber Eats, all of these that are creating opportunities to aggregate millions of small producers and consumers and allow us to maintain diversity of tastes and supply. And I think both of these, the combination of demand and technology, is something that gives me hope.
Vina, thank you so much. We've got 2 minutes. Paul, over to you. What for you gives you hope that we can actually do this?
I think, ironically, the COVID-19 crisis actually showed us how much we can change, how rapidly we can change our economy, our food systems, even our culture. So I think that, we now have a vision of how rapidly systems can change if we really need to make them change. So that does give me hope.
Elizabeth, we've got 60 seconds. What gives you hope?
What gives me hope is that we are now looking at things from a human rights, increasingly, we are looking at things from social justice perspective, from human rights perspective. And if we do this, we are going to look at food from a different perspective. We are going to restore the value of food. So we are going to ensure that people are not commodifying food so that they produce food that they cannot afford. We are going to ensure that everyone can access food because food is a human right and everyone needs to access it. So I am very happy that human rights are being respected increasingly. Thank you.
Thank you so much for an incredible scope of answers, insights into your wisdom and experience, and showing us exactly why you have been named Visionaries. Vina, Paul, and Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us. Now, let's zoom out and hear from two leaders who are responsible for looking at the global picture. Dr. David Beasley, Executive Director of the World Food Programme, and Gilbert Hongbu, who is the President of the International Fund for Agricultural Development.
I want to thank the organizers for the opportunity to take part in this important conversation. And I'm sorry I can't join you live. There's no doubt the COVID-19 pandemic is putting huge strain on the global food systems all over the world. It's affecting the supply chains which deliver food into commercial markets as well as in the humanitarian space. And it's particularly affecting the ability of people to buy food for their families, especially in lower income countries where many vulnerable people already live with the daily threat of hunger. Commercial transport shutdowns, strict border controls, movement restrictions, they're all increasing the cost and the time it takes to get food from the farm to the fork. For example, WFP trucks are currently taking 14 days to cross the border between Uganda and South Sudan instead of the normal 1 to 2 days it took previously. Meanwhile, the economic crisis created by COVID-19 means that globally, almost 1.6 billion workers in the informal economy can't now earn a living. Together, these factors are seriously damaging an already fragile food systems and dramatically increasing the number of people who need life-saving assistance. WFP expects that number of those that are marching to the brink of starvation to double from 135 million to 265 million people who will face acute food hunger in 2020, with COVID-19 joining conflict and climate change as a major driver of food insecurity. This public health crisis is turning into a global hunger pandemic, inflicting a fatal blow to communities already on the edge, destroying their livelihoods and straining humanitarian relief efforts. And that's why at WFP we're going all out to provide a lifeline for 120 million people of the world's most vulnerable people, ramping up our operations in over 83 countries to get the help to those who are in greatest danger and greatest need. For example, countries like Pakistan, where we're scaling up to feed an extra 1.2 million people at risk of hunger because of COVID-19 alone. WFP is working with governments everywhere to expand critical social safety nets and subsidies for the most vulnerable people so food systems can keep functioning. We're leveraging our expertise in cash programs to help 26 governments launch or scale up cash safety nets to tackle the socio-economic impact of COVID-19. For example, in Jordan, where in just 2 weeks we enable the government to reach an extra 250,000 families with cash payments via the cell phone. We're also harnessing our global expertise in school feeding to reach the children missing out on their one decent meal of the day because so many schools around the world are shut down. Our country teams are working with governments to provide take-home rations or home delivery programs or cash payments to make sure those children get at least one decent meal a day. And we're collaborating with UNICEF so that we can reach 10 million of the most vulnerable children in 30 of the most fragile countries in the coming weeks. But if we're serious about protecting our food systems and helping them become more resilient in the post-COVID world. We have to provide support right at the beginning of the supply chain. And that's why WFP is using its expertise in markets and procurement to support smallholder farmers and local agricultural systems. Just in the past 3 months alone, for example, WFP has injected $210 million into local economies by locally purchasing more than 440,000 metric tons of food. This global health crisis is a stark reminder of how global food systems are currently struggling to reach the millions of the most vulnerable families around the world. Our collective response to the COVID-19 pandemic must plant the seeds for more resilient, more sustainable food systems. And as we build them back up, we all need to work together to build them back better so we can realize our shared ambition of a future free from hunger.
Ladies and gentlemen, if farmers do not plant, harvest or sell, they have no income to buy necessities, to send their children to school, or to service the debt to the microcredit institutions. So at IFAD, we are taking action at the project level. In Senegal, for example, we have distributed seeds, fertilizer, and other inputs ahead of the planting season. In Malawi, we are looking to expand storage facilities for unsold food so that there are stocks for the upcoming lean season. The coronavirus pandemic is an enormous concern to me as a health crisis, as an economic and social crisis, and as a potential food crisis. And as president of the International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD, I am particularly worried about the impact on the millions of small-scale producers we work with. Most of the world's poorest people live in rural areas and depend on agriculture for their livelihoods. For months now, we have been hearing from farmers who cannot get seeds or fertilizer for the planting season because the borders are closed or travel is restricted. Some cannot harvest their fruits and vegetables because of shortage of farm laborers. And many can't sell because local and international markets are closed. This is important work. However, we must also look to the future. This crisis has exposed serious concerns and issues with the resilience and sustainability of our food systems. These problems did not start with the pandemic. They were already there. Crises, weather storms or floods or pandemic always hurt the poor and vulnerable the most. As we try to help them cope with this crisis and to rebuild afterwards, we have an opportunity to address the root causes of poverty, hunger, and vulnerability. That is what building back better means. It does not just mean bigger or more expensive. It means more resilient, more sustainable, more inclusive, and better tailored to each situation. But how do we build resilient food systems? We step up our support to small-scale farmers so they are productive, resilient, and they are connected to finance, to inputs and markets, and are not forced to live on the edge. We invest in safe storage and build food and financial reserves so that when crisis hits, small-scale producers have a buffer. We encourage farmers to diversify crops and diversify sources of income, so if one crop fails, they have a safety net. We combine agricultural and social protection support for those most at risk to address immediate needs as well as speed up medium to long-term recovery. This includes targeted productive safety nets, such as school meal programs, that ensure that when the next disaster occurs, poor people are better equipped to feed themselves and protect assets such as livestock and property. We work with insurance providers to offer coverage in remote areas for crop and livestock losses and weather damage, so small-scale farmers have the same protection as larger farms. For this to happen, we need more collaboration between government, the private sector, and academic institutions. The challenges we are now facing remind us of the importance of international cooperation. As we collectively respond to COVID-19 and look at rebuilding and recovery, we need to make sure no one is left behind.
We thank you for the incredible words from the leaders of the World Food Programme and IFAD. That is the International Fund for Agricultural Development, who have just shared their visions with us and their inspiring and insightful words. All our speakers today, I think, are making it quite clear the scope of the challenges that we're up against. And also, I hope that you have been inspired also about this unique opportunity, I guess, to press the reset button and to really, truly, with us, reimagine the food systems of tomorrow. So we have loved hearing your stories of hope. Also, thank you for sharing with us the bright spots during COVID. Massimo, our first speaker today, reminded us to keep in touch with beauty and love and the good things during this very challenging time. We have received over 225 replies from you. You can see it on the screen. And we want to ask you to keep that coming. Now, we're going to pause for a short break. We're going to pause for a short 3-minute break. So grab something to drink, get comfortable, and return to us, because we'll be back for a challenge for all of you and some exciting speakers, including Kate Rayworth and Johan Rockström. Stay tuned. Well, we've just heard from a range of speakers on the front lines of the food crisis. So welcome back, everybody. We'll have a short recap on what they were discussing. What we heard from them was about the devastation and the challenges that COVID has had on the global food system, and how really leaders around the world are taking on these challenges and helping us to shift to a new and maybe more positive, or rather more conscious and informed normal. We've also heard about marginalized communities being undernourished and the importance of investing in food as medicine. And we've also heard about the importance of having really creating the food security needed, also clean and waste-free systems to achieve that, and importantly, planting seeds. So those are some of the ideas that came up earlier on. And now we have some more great things lined up for you. It is time to reimagine. And what are we reimagining? We are now reimagining a more equitable and nourishing, resilient food system. And how are we going to do that? Well, before we turn to our next set of speakers, we're going to share some ideas and opportunities to transform food systems for the future. And we have our very first challenge for you. And to do that, we are going to turn it over to Dr. Fabrice de Klerk, who is the Science Director at EAT, coming to us live and direct from France, and also Chef Michael Alegbede, coming to us from Nigeria to say more. Welcome, Fabrice and Michael.
Thanks, Natalie. Wow, what great stories of hope. I particularly like the chat function, what we're seeing there. Michael, how are you, buddy? It's been a long time since you last spoke in Stockholm. COVID's really shaking things up. What are you seeing in Lagos?
Hi, Fabrice. Great catching up with you. It's been a challenging period in Lagos due to the circumstances, but it's also given us a chance to explore and the diverse foods and ingredients that we have locally.
I'm sorry to hear that, Michael, but my heart really goes out to you and all Nigerians. But despite how terrible this pandemic's been, I think, as we've heard in today's session, it's really allowed people to call into question their relationship with food. I had an Indian colleague last week who just referred to how confinement, cooking at home, has allowed people to rediscover the love affair with food. Someone in the chat said, we were all making sourdough. Paul in the previous session, I think, was quite importantly pointing out that when we need to change, we can change. I hope we can move into a planned change through some of these ideas. But you mentioned diversity, and this is a topic that I know you and I are both deeply passionate about. And I'm thrilled that Massimo and Emmanuel also emphasized at the start of today's session. Some in the chat also flagged that they're digging deeper in their pantry and rediscovering ingredients lost in its dark recesses. In conservation, we're always framing the issue as less of something, less energy, less water, less fertilizer. But diversity is the one thing that we need more of. Here we're talking about reimagining food, and I find that 20 species making up 80% of the foods we eat is completely unimaginative. You just don't get nutritious, regenerative, or resilient food systems of 20 species. And those are the three adjectives we heard flagged out at the start. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to challenge you and everyone online to see if we can exponentially diversify our ingredient list. Can we crowdsource 2,000 ingredients over the next hour? I'm getting told that I'm not likely to break 200, but I'm hoping that you, Michael, and everyone online can help to prove me wrong.
I don't know, Fabrice, but I'm willing to guess you'll break at least 3,000. But I accept your challenge and also invite everyone online to join. There are more than 5,000 of you joining us today. Each one of you adding one ingredient would blow Fabrice's challenge out of the water. Go to sli.do, add an ingredient, hit return, add another ingredient, hit return again, add in as many ingredients as you like. Fruits, nuts, seeds, vegetables, shellfish, even insects.
That gives me some hope, but let's see if I can get you to set the pace. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to list as many ingredients as you can and have you tell us a little bit about each one. Are you ready?
Game on.
All right, ready? Go.
Black eyed peas with scotch bonnet, tomatoes, onions with bell peppers for a tasty porridge, uda, omilo, calabash nutmeg, uda, control onion, catfish for a lovely pepper soup, millet, ginger, sweet potato, alligator peppers for a fermented kunu drink, hibiscus leaves with pineapple for a zobo drink, cassava for fufu, eaten with banga, made with oborumbebe or taiko, and palm fruit, moringa leaves, dawa dawa, mishanu to make miyan zogale, finished with ogogor, a local spirit.
Not bad, Michael. It's in 30 seconds.
Do you think you can do better?
I
let's
don't
go.
know. Let's see if we can try.
Ready, set, go.
All right, buckwheat flour, excellent for crepes, artichokes, perfect veggie meal, rice from Camargue, my staple for paella here in southern France, with mussels, clams, and broad beans, zucchini, cœur de bœuf tomato, sweet onions from the Cévennes, and bell peppers. These are the staples of a good ratatouille. Working with Mayan farms Yucatan and Mexico in their home gardens, added squash, black beans, and colorful varieties of maize to my kitchen, along with pungent habanero and chili mash. Chaya, a euphorb, nopales from cactus as new greens, pitaya, which many of you might know as dragon fruit, or jica, with some lime and chili mash. Closer to home, endives, asparagus, Brussels sprouts are Belgian staples, and
Not bad, not bad. 23 ingredients, but too short of my list. Everyone wins, however, when we amplify this challenge. Together, we've listed 47 ingredients in 1 minute. We're well on our way to building an exponential pantry for the spice of life. I see several ingredients being listed online right now. Keep building on this list over the next hour, everyone. And Natalie, let's check in the next break. But let's keep this challenge going beyond today. I challenge you, Fabrice, and all your nerd friends at the Alliance of Biodiversity and SIA to continue to build on this list for the fall. Let's not only add ingredients, but also recipes, stories, nutritional values, and how to grow this diversity in an open source space.
Challenge accepted, Michael. I love the idea of building an exponential pantry. Let's make sure that we regenerate both the diversity of ingredients in our pantry, but also the diversity of knowledge. Local knowledge, culinary knowledge, nutritional information, agricultural knowledge, all are critical pieces of knowledge that accompanies diversity. Knowledge diversity, just like species diversity, is also extinction prone. Be well, Michael. Thanks for joining me today. And let's check in again in October to see how we're doing with this challenge.
Michael and Fabrice.
Thank you, Fabrice, for bringing me on.
Michael, please go ahead. I didn't mean to cut your words.
Yes, thank you, Fabrice, for bringing me on and having me on this challenge. Goodbye, everyone. And as our Yoruba people say, Odabo.
Adavo. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Fabrice, for such a fun challenge. Wow, I'm really impressed. Wrapping chefs and bringing on the ingredients. I really like the insects and I like the local spirit, which is an added ingredient. I guess being Norwegian, South African, from South Africa, mopani worms, from Norway, reker. Those could be my ingredients. Anyway, what a fun challenge. Let's see how many we can get. Minimum of 200, over 2,000 maybe, and keep that challenge going. Keep it coming with your ingredients. Well, now it's time to rebuild food systems to advance equity, sustainability, resilience, and nutrition. The next 4 speakers are a quick relay of big ideas that can do just that. So here's what we're going to hear about. A Plan for the Planet from Professor Johan Rockström. The Food System Vision Prize from Roy Steiner and Sarah Farley of the Rockefeller Foundation. Ensuring a safe and a just space for our reimagined food systems. And that'll be from Kate Rayworth, who is the co-director of Donut Economics Action Lab. And Measuring Change with the Food Systems Dashboard, we'll hear from Dr. Lawrence Haddad of GAIN.
I will be honest with you. As a young researcher working with small-scale farms in Africa, the aim was at one thing: to maximize productivity. I was deeply concerned, and still am, but for different reasons, of the one-ton agriculture in Africa, with no chance of lifting millions of people from undernutrition, and much less to feed a future population exceeding 2 billion by 2050. But maximizing production of food, while important in the most food insecure regions of the world, will not take us to a future where all people in the world can have a chance of a good life on Earth. We also need a grand transformation to healthy and sustainable food within planetary boundaries. In fact, one of the key findings in our Eat Lancet report, the first scientific attempt of defining universal targets for health and sustainable food, the planetary health diet, is that there is no successful delivery of the Paris Climate Agreement of keeping global warming well below 2 degrees, and there is no successful delivery of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals unless people across the world meet the scientific targets set out by the planetary diet, the planetary health diet that we presented in the Eat Lancet Commission report. For we have a new risk landscape. 9 of the 15 known tipping elements in the Earth system are on the move, showing worrying signs of change, like the slowdown of the Gulf Stream, accelerated melt of Antarctica, and increased permafrost thawing. Food is behind all of these changes. As the world's single largest emitter of greenhouse gases, the world's largest consumer of fresh water, and the world's #1 cause behind land use change and biodiversity loss, and interference with the global cycles of nitrogen and phosphorus. We warned already 6 months before the pandemic outbreak by putting on the table of a Heads of State event at the United Nations headquarters in September 2019 the evidence that humanity must now consider declaring a state of planetary emergency. We face irreversible changes, undermining the ability for human development in the future with rising shocks and crises. A few months later, the pandemic struck. This was not a black swan. It was expected, no surprise, and COVID-19 is a manifestation of the Anthropocene, the new geological epoch we have entered, where we humans are the dominant force of change on Earth. The SARS-CoV-2 virus is a zoonosis, a virus spillover from wild animals to humans, occurring as a result of destruction of natural wildlife habitats, simplification of landscapes through agriculture, wildlife trading and wet markets where wildlife, domestic animals, and humans interact, all accelerated and amplified in our hyper-connected, globalized world through air travel and global trade. A perfect cocktail for epidemics that can accelerate to pandemics. At the heart is food. But food is also influenced by the human impacts of COVID-19 itself. Obesity, diabetes, malnutrition, all rapidly rising health challenges across the world due to poor food consumption habits, making us weaker and deadly targets of the coronavirus. We need to urgently redefine the food system and start the transformation towards a planetary health diet future for all. Here are a few pieces of the puzzle that can inspire the Eat at Home dialogues. Number 1, a food system that follows the carbon law of cutting global emissions by half every decade, which is the scientific path to have a chance of staying well below 2 degrees Celsius of global warming. The food system is integral to this. It's an innovation, transformation, and equity pathway. But that's not enough. We need to have biosphere targets, setting science-based targets for all planetary boundaries that define a safe space for humanity on Earth. A key vision is an apex target for not only climate, but also biodiversity. A fundamental step on this is the scientific support that now is the time to feed humanity at no more expansion of agricultural land, meaning a zero loss of natural ecosystems from 2020 and onwards. The third is a nitrogen and phosphorus revolution, closing the cycles of nutrients in sustainable, efficient agriculture, as with freshwater systems. We can do this by minimizing impacts and staying within safe operating spaces. The fourth is a resilience transformation, investing in agricultural systems that build diversity and redundancy are best insurance mechanisms towards risks of future shocks from pandemics to climate impacts. And fifth and final, to invest in governance systems that manages and governs the global commons, recognizing we're all interconnected in the globalized world of the Anthropocene. A key economic measure here is to internalize all the externalities, so not only thinking of a price on carbon, but also thinking of price on nitrogen, on phosphorus, setting value on ecosystem services that can give us a good, straight incentive scheme for transformations towards sustainable, healthy food systems. Science is on the move here, and EAT has been and continues to be absolutely the leading front. We have established the Earth Commission, an interdisciplinary scientific commission to assess for the first time the safe and just operating space for humanity on Earth, where food is one key component, and the EAT initiative of the Food Systems Economics Commission to set economic policies and directions to accelerate and amplify the transformation towards sustainable, healthy food systems. So a lot moving on, but still increased momentum required. Eat at Home as a key part of this dialogue. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Roy Steiner, and I'm so excited to be here. You've already heard a few of the Food System Vision Prize semifinalists describe the incredible work they're doing. But you may be wondering, why did we design this prize, and what is its purpose? Well, the ideas were inspired by an exercise my team did at the Omidyar Network when we reviewed all the books and movies about the future or were set in the future, and tried to categorize them as either optimistic or pessimistic. As you can probably guess, the vast majority, 98% of them, were dystopian. So they're movies like The Hunger Games, Black Mirror, Handmaid's Tale, the list just keeps going on. And so we become really good as a society describing the world we don't want. We're actually not very good at describing the world we actually want. Well, in 2020, it seems like some of our worst fears are coming to play. We've got the global pandemic, systematic racism, unemployment, food and nutrition insecurity, and of course, climate change. So when we created the prize, we wanted to inspire optimistic visions for the future. And we couldn't imagine they were going to be as needed as they are right now. We designed and launched the prize in 2019 with our partners Second Muse and OpenIDO. And our goal was to change the global narrative and give people a way to shift from depictions of the future from dystopian to optimistic, from surviving to thriving, from incremental to transformative. And we didn't really know what the response would be. Well, we got 1,300 submissions from 119 countries. And we're thrilled to have 76 teams representing 30 unique geographies in the semifinals right now.
Thanks, Roy. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Farley, and I want to jump right in with an answer to a question that you may be wondering, which is, how do these visions connect to the COVID-19 crisis that we're facing today? Let's watch.
For all the devastation the pandemic has brought, perhaps it is the opportunity for a fundamental realignment that enables us to embrace an ecological food culture.
Farmers, entrepreneurs, and fishers having to reinvent themselves. This crisis is an opportunity to create jobs on productive sector.
It also motivated citizens to farm, as made evident by the growth in requests to our local organic seed bank that went up by 600%.
We saw an increased interest in local, healthier produce and the desire to connect with farmers.
COVID-19 demonstrated the willingness of the community to embrace the local food that was being offered through new avenues, and our small-scale farmers were unable to meet the huge surge in demand.
Post-pandemic, our solution for a better food system sees high-tech farms
such as precision fermentation,
adapted hydroponics,
vertical farming and bioproduction
sit alongside regenerative market gardens.
Together, we are rebuilding a regional food system with strong circular food economies and food hubs that include small-scale and large-scale agriculture.
Our vision has now been updated to build a more resilient future
that produces its own food, ensures job creation within the food system, and shares excess food across the socioeconomic divide.
In our future, milk is produced without cows, eggs without chicken, and meat without killing.
In the year 2050, our technology will enable the production of truly local, harm-free animal protein.
In these times, it's especially important that the scientists step out and show science is like magic, but real.
We are deeply committed with environmental food and food education.
And promote social peace through the thing that everyone needs and loves the most, food.
The transition towards this future is based on reconnection with land, food, culture, health, and each other.
Our resilience, our resolve, and our energy will deliver a food system
that feeds and nourishes its people
and establish a global symbiosis between humans and other species.
We can solve the current problem, and in our vision, that's what we want to achieve.
So though each vision may be unique to a city, a region, or a country, all of them work toward a future that is nourishing, equitable, resilient, and sustainable. But beyond that, they force us to ask really difficult questions like, what is the balance between efficiency and the quality that we demand from our future food systems? Or how do we balance the need to improve livelihoods for farmers with the need to make healthy, nutritious food affordable? Ultimately, each food system vision for the year 2050 is unique, but these tensions remind us of a powerful truth about the future. It is ours to write. It can be designed by you, by every single one of you watching this program today. We can all be protagonists in our own future. So what's next? The Food System Vision Prize community is now 8,000 people strong and growing. In the coming months and years, we're going to be working toward 4 concrete goals. The first is generating and sharing knowledge about food systems and food systems transformation. The second, building networks. The third, unleashing innovation. And the fourth, spurring investment into food systems transformation. Ultimately, we're looking to build a global network that can connect the food system visionaries to the many networks seeking to engage in next year's United Nations Food Systems Summit. We seek to enable the visionaries and other food systems actors to articulate action plans to build back better post-COVID. More immediately, we are about to announce our 10 finalists at the beginning of August. After that, they will be joining into an accelerator focused on honing their action plans and storytelling. And we believe that's really going to be critical to position them for success, to spark a movement around their really powerful ideas. Until then, we invite everyone to come to the Food System Vision Prize website, check out these ideas, offer your own, connect to the teams, join the effort. Ultimately, we want this prize to unlock change and spark a movement. The visionaries still only represent a few thousand of what are almost 8 billion food system innovators in the world. We believe every single person on the planet can be a force for change, because even if you're not a farmer or a food scientist or a chef, we're all eaters, and we all have a stake in a healthy, resilient, and equitable future. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Kate Rayworth. I'm an economist passionate about creating economic thinking and practice that's fit for the realities of this century. A century that began with financial meltdown and rocketing food prices. In the context of climate breakdown, and most recently, COVID lockdown, all impacts are sharply increased by inequalities of race and gender, of wealth and power, global north and global south. Together, these tell us we need a new vision of what human prosperity looks like, and we need to transform the dynamics of our economies to get there. So let me offer you a donut, the only one that actually turns out to be any good for us. Because just as there is an outer limit of pressure we can put on the planet, those planetary boundaries, Earth's life-supporting systems, so too there's an inner limit of pressure that can be put on each person. We call these our human rights. Every person has a claim to meet their essential needs for food and water, healthcare, housing, political voice, education. Leave no one falling short in the hole in the middle, but don't overshoot the outer boundary. We need to meet the needs of all people within the means of the planet, and this is the safe and just space for humanity. On food specifically, we know that the number of people going hungry in the world has been increasing for the first time in recent years, and now, due to COVID-19, it's set to more than double by the end of the year to over 260 million people. But there are billions of people falling short on all of these social dimensions. So how do we transform these dynamics of shortfall and overshoot at the same time? To me, there are 2 essential dynamics that we need to transform. First, we've inherited economies that are linear and degenerative by design. We take Earth's materials, put them in the pipe of production, make them into things we want and throw it away. In food, we know that we've been throwing away up to 30 to 50% of the food that's produced globally. We have to turn this linear, wasteful system into a circular, regenerative one, where food and organic materials are returned to the land, replenishing the soil, replenishing Earth's living systems so that she can continue to feed herself and all of humanity. And at the same time, we've inherited a food system that is deeply divisive, with much of the world's food production controlled in the hands of a few major agribusiness corporations and major retailers, driving opportunity and value into the hands of very few. We need to turn this into many global food systems that are distributive by design, that share and interconnect value and opportunity between all who are involved in producing food, from growers, communities, cooperatives, suppliers, and customers. How do we transform our food systems to make them both distributive and regenerative by design? And here's my challenge to every one of us. Look at the design of the very institutions we work for. Whether you work for a major corporation or a small local cooperative, a university, a foundation, an NGO, or a government, there are 5 design traits of organizations that we need to align if we are to transformatively deliver on food systems that actually work. And here they are. First, what is your organizational purpose? Why do you exist in the world? Are you serving a 21st century purpose? And how are you networked with your suppliers, your customers, your employees, your supporters, your financiers, your allies? Are those networks reinforcing the values you stand for? And how are you reinforcing those values throughout your networks? How are you governed? Who has voice at the decision-making table? What are the rules, the practices, the incentives, the metrics by which you judge success? Now going deeper, how is your organization owned? Is it owned by a family, by a government, by venture capital, by its own employees or customers, by shareholders? Because all these very different ownership designs profoundly shape the deepest source of design, which is finance. How is your organization financed? And what is that finance demanding? If it's demanding a fast and financial return, it may well be undermining your very purpose. But if it's investing and committing to long-term transformation of food systems in line with your purpose, then you can begin to align these 5 design traits so that your organization can be part of creating the food systems we know we need for a thriving 21st century. Thanks for letting me join. I offer you that challenge to take away.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Lawrence Haddad, and I'm the Executive Director of the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, or GAIN. GAIN, together with Jessica Fanzo and her team at Johns Hopkins University and all the other partners you see here, are proud to show you around the new Food Systems Dashboard, hot off the presses. Now, the dashboard has been developed over the past 3 years in response to a felt need from a range of potential users, policymakers, businesses, international agencies, researchers, and civil society groups. They've all been scrabbling around for quality data to understand their food systems. So, working with our partners, we pulled in data for all countries from 30 different sources, public and private, and we identified and quality screened 170 indicators, organizing them by where they sit in the food system. The indicators are organized by whether they're in the food supply chains, food environments, individual factors, consumer behavior, diets, nutrition, other outcomes, or external drivers. The aim is to help stakeholders describe their food systems. What are the data telling them? Diagnose their food systems. Where are the worries? Where are the concerns? Where are the strengths? And then crucially, to help them decide what to do, what actions to take to transform those systems. We're still developing the diagnose and decide functions with support from a number of key partners, including the Rockefeller Foundation, but there's more than enough to help users zero in on problems right now. For example, say you're a food policymaker in Bangladesh, and you're trying to figure out what to do to increase the consumption of vegetables. And the dashboard tells you that the consumption of vegetables in your country is 1/3 that of India's. It also shows you that prices are high. In fact, they're twice as high as they are in India. That should be a stimulus to production. But supply of vegetables in Bangladesh is half of India's. What's going on? Maybe it's vegetable losses that are high in the system. The dashboard data say no. You can see here that vegetable losses are about 8%, which is not that high. Or perhaps it is that yields of vegetables are low. The dashboard data say yes, that's a problem. Vegetable yields in Bangladesh are much lower than they are in the rest of South Asia. So from a policy perspective, this points to growing practices and technology as places to start looking if the policymaker wants to improve vegetable consumption in Bangladesh. Now, the dashboard also helps businesses trying to map emerging markets for healthy food potential. Say, for example, you want to know, where are the physical transaction costs of doing business likely to be low? Well, Kenya has a low score for the quality of agricultural infrastructure. That's quite surprising, but perhaps even more surprisingly, Ethiopia and Mozambique have scores that are almost double. Their infrastructure in agriculture is much better than in Kenya's. The cost of moving stuff around in their food systems is likely to be lower. So don't write off Ethiopia and Mozambique as places to do business, at least not on this count. How about if you're a business and you're worried about where is purchasing power going to be a big constraint to your ambition to introduce nutritious foods? You can see here, in India, the cost of a nutritionally adequate diet is half of what Indian families spend on average on food. So the potential is there to change behaviors without income growth. But in Ethiopia, the cost of a nutritionally adequate diet is more, much more, than families spend on food. So here the business challenge is innovation to reduce cost. Well, let's say you're a business focused on the potential faithful consumer for life, also known as the adolescent. Where is the potential to capture adolescent market share with healthy foods? So first, where are adolescents frequently consuming fast foods that could be turned into healthy foods? Well, the dashboard data say Thailand. 3 times a week, adolescents in Thailand are purchasing fast food. Second, where are adolescent overweight rates high? Again, Thailand. 22% of children and adolescents are overweight in Thailand. And finally, where is the cost of a nutritious diet low relative to expenditures on food? Again, the data say Thailand. So here is a business opportunity for healthy fast food. High fast food consumption, high obesity levels, relatively low cost of nutritious foods, Thailand. Finally, we want one of the big users of the dashboard to be the 2021 UN Food System Summit stakeholders. Now, the dashboard classifies all countries' food systems into one of 5 types, as you can see on this slide. And this kind of analytic work can really help support the summit's action tracks. And we all want to see the summit as the time when all the well-being indicators began to bend more sharply in the right direction. The dashboard can help. Please use it, share it, help us improve it, and most importantly, act on it. Thank you.
Well, thank you to our esteemed speakers for sharing your big ideas on how to build sustainability, resilience, and nutrition and equity into our food systems. Right now, I'm joined by Sarah Farley from the Rockefeller Foundation, and she's going to share with us and reflect upon what we've just heard. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. Sarah, so thanks to you and Roy, first of all, for sharing why we need a Food Systems Vision Prize, also to each of our esteemed speakers. And as we talk about the need to rebuild food systems, I find it really inspiring to hear about the latest ideas on how to build equity, sustainability, resilience, and nutrition into our food.
I totally agree. This moment is so fraught for people globally that hearing from leaders that are not only thinking about but acting on systems change is so empowering. It's so incredible. And I think every one of these speakers is charting a pathway to reimagine food systems for our future.
Sarah, thank you. And I think for me, this set of speakers has also helped to remind us really of the connections between issues like planetary health, equity, resilience, and sustainability, all of these cornerstones. What I'd like to know is which common threads resonated for you across each of the 5 speakers?
Yeah, it's true, Natalie, because food systems are so intrinsically linked to health, economics, environment, policy, governance, technology, and that systems articulation just really shone through beautifully in Johan, Kate's remarks as well, and the visionaries. And so, yeah, I think we have a lot of excitement there. From Johan's perspective, one of the pieces that resonated was his notion of a planetary diet and the idea that we must transform our food systems, but we can't afford to do so outside of planetary boundaries. Then with Kate, she used some amazing props, just need to acknowledge that. And they really endorse this idea that we can and must shift our industrial agricultural system into a regenerative one. I think also her beckoning to each of us to interrogate the purpose, the networks, the governance, the ownership, and the financial structures of the institutions we inhabit was really important. But the common thread there is transforming food systems is about moving forward human health and planetary health.
Sarah, thank you. Absolutely. And building resilience into food systems, I guess, is another key piece of the puzzle that you have mentioned, and also one that feels particularly pressing at this time when we have seen the fragility and the vulnerability of the global food systems brought to light in stark contrast by COVID-19. And it stood out to me that resilience really came up as the common theme amongst the speakers and many of the conversations we've also heard today. At the same time, these are all really big ideas for systems change. So my question to you, Sarah, is how do you see some of these ideas really being translated into practice and action and impact on the ground?
Absolutely. It's hard sometimes. Talking about food systems transformation can feel so big, so abstract, but I think that's what is exciting both about the visionaries, but also the ideas that were crystallized in Lawrence, Kate's, and Johan's commentary. If I come back to the Food System Vision Prize, this group of 1,300 entities, teams around the world, they're not waiting to find out who is announced a finalist in August or goes on to win this prize. They are taking action now. I'll give you 3 of the many examples that we've caught wind of. In Nigeria, we have a team that's had a series of protracted discussions with local policymakers, and they're really on the cusp of embedding some of these ideas into national policy. Then there's a team in Mumbai. Their focus had been connecting marginalized farmers with at-risk urban consumers. Well, when the pandemic hit, they basically triaged their idea to now create a farmer-producer organization, and they are effectively delivering food that was trapped on the farm to various distributors and consumers that need that food desperately during the time of the lockdowns. And then I have to mention Puerto Rico, where the agricultural administration there has been so taken by this beautiful vision being put forward by a team in Puerto Rico that they are looking to embed that in their 2050 plan for public policy, economics, and nutrition. So it's just story after story. These are teams that are mobilizing. And if we turn to Johan's remarks, I think what's really empowering, he is talking about a piece of work expressed by the Eat Lancet Commission that can inform the choices we all make in terms of the diets we adopt. If we have the resources to do so as individuals and as families, we can work to change what we eat so that we're working to advance our human health, the health of our children, and the health of our planet. And last, just, a huge shout out to Lawrence Haddad, Jess Fanzo, and the team. That food system dashboard they've put together is really powerful. Lawrence gave that wonderful example from Bangladesh, but this is a new tool. Really excited to see where it goes, and I hope everyone listening will just check it out and be part of the journey to take it forward.
Sarah, thank you so much for sharing your reflections on these big ideas and on our speakers, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Natalie.
Well, it certainly appears that we are building a very strong foundation as we look ahead to the future of food systems. Our next set of speakers will share more specifics on the path forward. But before we get there, and before we announce a little break, what we are going to do is reflect a little bit on the challenge set out by Michael and Fabrice. And we have found out, let's see, that we have over 234 unique users who have contributed. We've got collard greens, cabbage, peach, roasted veggies are great, turnips, aquafab. So many ingredients. Keep them coming. We are receiving your answers. We've crossed the 200 mark, so we want 2,000. So keep it coming on Slido. Well, we're going to go for a short break. But before we have, that's before the final piece of our program. Thank you for staying with us. You do not want to miss this. We'll be hearing from leaders from across the world and behind the 2021 Food Systems Summit who have some important calls for action for you. Welcome back, everybody. How exciting. What an amazing conversation, hearing from all these incredible speakers, contributors from the science, from the Frontlines, from the Visionaries. And there's more to come. We're beginning the final portion of today's event with an all-hands-on-deck moment, and that means you. We're now going to hear about important opportunities to regroup in the months ahead. What is the way forward? But we have some homework for you first. So let's ask the question, what are you prepared to do? What are you prepared to do in order to build a better food future? And I'm talking to you and you and you. We want to hear from you, and this is what you have to do. Go and put your ideas in Sli.do. Go to the Ideas tab in Sli.do and tell us what you are prepared to do in order to build a better food future. We want to hear from you, and you'll share your ideas later. When you're answering, or rather while you're answering, I told you we'd be cooking today, and the show certainly is cooking, and we're also cooking with another fantastic chef. Chef Megha is here to share with us another delicious recipe.
Hello everyone, my name is Megha and I'm a chef from New Delhi, and I'm a proud member of the Chef's Manifesto, and I'm going to show you and I'm going to talk about Indian bread today that's really famous, and it is made in every Indian's home. The bread is called paratha. I'm making the dough for it. I'm just getting the dough ready, and a paratha is a bread that can be had as is or can be stuffed, and I'm going to stuff it with some leftover lentils that I have from my dinner last night. Instead of wasting them, I'm just going to stuff them into the dough of the paratha. Paratha is cooking now, and as you can see, I stuffed it with some lentils, and I'm going to have it with a seasonal vegetable called lauki. It's also known as bottle gourd. It's a summer vegetable, and it's bought locally, and it promotes biodiversity because it's local and seasonal. I'm going to enjoy my paratha with some green chilies, which are Indian, of course. As you know, as Indians we like to eat a lot of chili and spicy food, and this is also great for immunity, especially in COVID times. And I have spiced my lentils with some red chili powder, some turmeric, which again, as you know, is a great immunity booster, and you should definitely be adding turmeric to your diets, especially in the times of corona. I'm going to be enjoying my paratha with some mango pickle. Right now in India, it's the season of mangoes, and it's a season that most Indians look forward to every year. And you know, our grandmothers had a certain technique of preserving and using the full fruit, and that technique is known as pickling. So they would sun dry the mangoes in mango season on the terrace, and once the mangoes got sun dried, then they would make a pickle out of it with some essential spices that also provided immunity, and then we would relish this mango pickle throughout the year. So this is some freshly made mango pickle that I made last month, and now it's nice and ripe, and it's got fully pickled. And all of us, the perfect accompaniment to a paratha, they say, is achar, which is pickle, and I'm going to be eating it with this really delicious pickle. And lentils. Why did I choose to stuff the paratha with lentils? Because lentils firstly are a Future 50 food, and I am a great advocate for Future 50 foods. Lentils are rich in fiber, in protein, in iron, and in other minerals and vitamins. And did you know that lentils have a carbon footprint which is 43% lower than that of beef? They're also a great alternative to meats, because they are so rich in protein. They have 25% protein. So start incorporating lentils into your diet. So here it is, my seasonal and biodiverse and rich bottle gourd with my lentil paratha, some fresh mango pickle, and some green chilies. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chef Megha, coming to us all the way from India, sharing delicious recipes for paratha and grandmother's recipe for wonderful, all sorts of condiments, and also the fact that it is immunity boosting and healthy. What more could we ask for? Well, our last group of speakers will share their own calls to action for you and all of us to transform the food systems with an eye towards next year's Food Summit, or rather Food Systems Summit, which we'll hear more about, as a critical moment that we can all use to drive progress. But first, I'd like to welcome Dr. David Nabarro, who has got another challenge just for you. Dr.
Hello,
Nabarro.
everybody. It's really to be with you today. I'm speaking to you from Geneva in Switzerland, but I really would like to focus on food systems everywhere in the world. We're all talking about the transformation of food systems so that they are better for people and for the planet. And when we talk about the system, we're talking about the lots of different elements that come together to ensure not only that food reaches those who need it, but also that the people who produce food are able to get a decent standard of living, and at the same time that what the food that is produced, that it's nutritious, healthy and good for the environment and for climate. Now, there's not one simple solution. Over the last 2 years, we've been bringing together people all over the world to talk about how to transform food systems and to have discussions and dialogues so that they can better understand each other's perspectives on what matters in a food system. And through dialogue, they're coming out with new kinds of plans of ways of working together. And that's what I want to challenge you to focus on today. Could you be spending the next few weeks imagining what you can do in the food systems that you are part of to make them more sustainable, more healthy, and also better for the people who are involved in them? Think about it from your point of view, but then teleport yourself so that you're thinking about it also from the point of view of the people who are producing food, who are often very poorly paid, or the people in the factories that are processing food, who also may be poorly paid and working under difficult circumstances, or the people who are transporting and selling the food, or different people consuming food, but perhaps with 1/10 or 1/20th or 1/50th of the income you have. Think about food systems from different perspectives, particularly from the point of view of poorer and less well-advantaged people. And then imagine on top of that, that they're at risk of getting the COVID, the virus that's causing the current pandemic. And think about it all together so that you are seeing the system from multiple perspectives. That's what we encourage you to do in the food systems dialogues. And these dialogues are going to be building up over the coming weeks and months. And I'd like you, between now and September, to spend your time looking at food systems from lots of different perspectives. Role play it with your friends and colleagues if you want. Go and talk to people you don't normally talk to get their perspective. But most importantly, start thinking about the transformation of food systems from very different points of view, and particularly from the point of view of those who are poorest, those who suffer the greatest injustice, those who are facing inequity, and those who are exposed to this new virus. Because then I believe we will get a much more holistic and fair and just approach to food system transformation. Thank you very much.
David, thank you so much for sharing your fantastic perspectives, for helping us to challenge our own perceptions or preconceived notions, for helping us to expand our views, expand our perceptions, expand out of our own comfort zone. So thank you so much for your input, and that is a challenge to all of us watching today.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Dr. David Nabarro. Well, now it is my honor to introduce the leaders of today and of tomorrow. This past year, millions of youth leaders, you have seen them on the streets, you have seen them all over the world. They have demanded climate action through Fridays for Future. Listen carefully now as Lana from the US, we have Luke from the Caribbean, Mame from Ghana, Brittany from Australia, and Utsa from India. They're all calling in with their own bold statements for a transformed food system.
We are the leaders for tomorrow. We are the stakeholders for the next generation and cannot be left out in the reinvention of our future food systems. for a post-COVID world. We ask for collaboration, diversity and inclusion, cross-functional and disciplinary, multinational and cultural engagement in the reconstruction of our future food systems to ensure food security. Now is the time to be real and ask us how would love our future food systems to look like and do the recreation with us.
We are here today imagining the future of our youngest generation. Engaging youth is non-negotiable in building back food systems for a post-COVID world because we will ultimately be the ones left to live with a world that has been neglected by past generations. To ensure that our imagined future food systems can in fact be built, youth demand a ban on all new factory farms with a subsequent phase-out to all existing factory farming operations. We demand an end to all subsidies to the factory farming meat and dairy industries. Youth demand recognition in all countries' dietary guidelines that moving to more plant-based eating is healthier and better for the planet. And we demand a seat at the table for youth in all climate action and food systems meetings. For all the listeners joining us today, if there were to be one thing you could do to honor the voices of youth hungry for food systems transformation, it would be to take up our demands and champion the change youth need for our futures.
For those listening, you may have young persons in your networks. Reach out to them, have a conversation with them. You would be amazed of the ideas that they have already started. Partner with them. It's not about competition, it's about complementing. It's not about reinventing, but we just want to support young people out there. So for those of you, the world has changed, the mindset has changed. We want to uproot those assumptions of the old and grow the future of tomorrow today. And by the way, I'm currently recruiting thoughtful food ambassadors right here in the Caribbean.
With most of our global youth already hyper-connected through technology, I'm imagining a future where we utilize this to connect youth with local growers and more sustainable food solutions. We need policy to ensure that those solutions are equitably funded and available to youth everywhere. For those privileged enough, I highly recommend volunteering to kickstart this with organisations such as Thought for Food. Good luck!
For the first time in history, the youth has all the necessary tools, vision, passion and possibilities to contribute and change the trajectory of future decades. And that's why, let's inspire, engage and empower this youth with diverse stakeholders in food and agriculture industry through industry transforming initiatives our next generation innovators represent. Zero hunger, global climate change, all this problem, we as a generation didn't start it, but let's commit ourselves to be the part of solution and bloody finish it.
Thank you to all our young leaders, leaders of today and tomorrow, for those inspiring demands for action and passionate words from the soul. We thank you so much for your contributions. Now I would like to introduce you and it's over to Dr. Agnes Kalibata. Dr. Kalibata has taken on the important role as a UN Special Envoy for the 2021 Food Systems Summit. So let's hear what plans she has. Dr. Kalibata, thank you for joining us.
No, thank you, Natalie. And let me start by thanking the IT Forum and the Rockefeller Foundation for organizing this forum on our food systems and a discussion on our food systems. It's very encouraging to hear what people are saying. I just want to tell you that based on what I'm hearing here, but also based on the resounding theme that I hear from everybody around building back better, I'm a very firm believer on what is possible. In fact, if you've heard me talk before, you probably heard me talk about my beginnings, humble beginnings in refugee camps, kept alive by the work of UNHCR. And that's why I'm extremely grateful to the work that David and the World Food Programme is doing right now to ensure that a lot of people that are affected by COVID-19 do have food and do survive this, because they will survive this. So it's that ability to survive this type of situation and that belief in what is possible, that mindset that I took to my work going back to Rwanda when I finished my PhD, and really worked with a country that was broken from the genocide, but also very difficult to work with from an agricultural perspective, where you have 0.5 of a hectare for 89% of the population as the average land size. And you know, long story short, today, Rwanda is a country that is largely food secure. Today, Rwanda is a country that everybody looks at as a country that is on its journey of prosperity. So it's possible, and it is that very mindset of prosperity and what is possible that, again, I bring to the Food Systems Summit. Last year, the Secretary General announced the Food Systems Summit, recognizing that our food systems are not meeting our needs. We produce 300 times more food than we produced 50 years ago. We figured out how to produce food in new ways, but we have 1 billion people that don't have food today as I speak. Lack of nutrition and poor nutrition is our #1 cause of death. We are losing $1 trillion worth of all the food we produce. We are causing biodiversity loss at the highest rate ever, and we are contributing to climate change. We are contributing 30% to greenhouse gases. So our food system needs to be fixed. Our food system needs to be in a better place. But I'm saying all this because it's actually possible, despite where we are at today, despite the challenges we've seen with COVID. It's actually possible. We've spent the last 6 months working on a preparatory process for the Food Systems Summit. We will launch the whole summit preparatory process and all the instruments of the summit on the 7th of July. We have action tracks that we'll bring to you. We have food systems dialogue that we are bringing your way. We have an open online platform that we are bringing your way. I've had young people and the calls they are making. We will be looking for certain things. We will reach out to every country, to every household, to every city, to every individual. We will reach out to you. We will bring this conversation to you. We will be looking in return for your leadership, for innovation, for that idea of what is possible, what we could do differently. We'll be looking for action. On an individual level, and I'm talking to you personally, on an individual level, we'll be looking for you to make conscious decisions. We make decisions 3 times a day on what we eat. We have to be asking ourselves, is this going to be the right thing for my health? Is this going to be the right thing for my planet? We will be betting on you. So I'm asking you all to be champions of the Food Systems Summit, because we have to build back better. We have to use this as an opportunity to define a new food systems for our planet and for our people, and a better future for our children. Thank you.
Dr. Kalibata, thank you so much for joining us. Really fantastic that you can join us, and also for inviting us and challenging us to build back better. We surely look forward to the summit next year. And now for an announcement that is close to my heart. You may have noticed that Eat at Home has been mentioned at least a few times today. Well, to close today, we have the founder and executive chair of Eat, Dr. Gunhild Stordalen, who is going to be telling us exactly what this digital experience is.
Thanks, Natalie. I really look forward to tell more about Eat at Home and what that is. But honestly, this is our announcement, because you are going to be our host. We are so excited.
Thank you. I cannot wait. I'm so excited and blessed to be part of this wonderful conversation of people coming together and contributing to this great cause. So thank you.
Okay, so before I start, I just have to take a moment to say, wow, and thank you. This has been an intense and an inspiring experience. Reimagining food systems together with all of you, joining us from 126 countries. So we are truly grateful to each of you online, to our contributors, our co-host, the Rockefeller Foundation, the team behind the scenes who made today possible, and to you, Natalie. Thank you all.
Gunhild, you've asked for 5 minutes.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so 5 minutes it is. All crisis results in some kind of new start. It reminds us what really matters in life. And maybe it makes us ask, Who am I? And who do I truly want to be? What kind of world do I want to live in? History is full of moments of change, where we changed direction, set a new course, became better or worse. We've come together today because we need something new, something different. Next year, the UN Food Systems Summit will take place. And this is a historic opportunity for all of us. But between now and then, how can we all contribute to help Agnes and her team, even beyond the formal process she has laid out, to make sure that summit becomes a success? The science says we have less than 10 years, less than a decade, to literally make it or break it. I know change is difficult, and the food system is incredibly complex. And the changes we are talking about are not small reforms or shifts. It's radical transformation. And naturally, it's easy to think such big changes are impossible, overwhelming, but we no longer have a choice. The COVID-19 pandemic has made it obvious to everyone that the food system is broken. We don't have a choice but to build back better, to a better tomorrow with a fair, healthy, sustainable, regenerative, just and resilient food system. We know there is another reality from this one, and the science shows that it is possible. We know what to do. We know what to do. Now it's all about the how. How do we all do this together now? And to be honest with you, I stand here now feeling more optimistic and more encouraged than in a long, long time. Because today our community has grown. There are thousands of you here, and I can't wait to do more work with you together and learn with you all. At EAT, we are lucky and we get to work with the best scientists in the world, the sharpest minds, the warmest hearts, the activists, the politicians, the farmers, the entrepreneurs, the chefs, the investors, and the CEOs. And we get to see it up close and be part of the great work that so many of you are doing. From the beginning, the idea of EAT has been that we are stronger together, and that the severity and the complexity of the situation forces us to think big and to come together despite the differences and the borders that separate us. And for 7 years now, we have worked together on how to fix the broken food system. But now it's a new day. Now we gather differently. Before we were a smaller group in a big room. Now we are a bigger and better and broader group connected through our screens. We are literally living more in our values of inclusivity and bold change. And we see how far we can reach and how efficient we can be across borders and across time zones, and how many we are, how crises literally are opportunities, and how reimagination can set the course. So now it's time to go big and go home. Yes, I'm not kidding you, literally speaking, because now we are taking the EAT forums home to all of you, into your kitchens or couches or living rooms or wherever you are on your smartphone. Our new digital platform called EAT at Home is the chance to go big this fall and towards the summit. And EAT at Home will be a series you can participate in. It will be live broadcasts, workshops and events and more. And EAT is setting the table and opening the kitchen. And we are inviting you to the meal and frankly into the kitchen to help us cook. So we want to know who you are, how you can contribute. And we need your questions and your insights and your solutions and your demands. And we invite you to join this growing choir of voices. And as we increase in number, we become bigger, faster, better, and stronger. And we can actually save our world and all of us in it, and the generations to come. But only if we do it together. There is a Norwegian word I love that is not easily translated, but it's dugnad. And dugnad, it means each of us brings what we have and what we can do, and we come together to create something for the community, our world, that we could never make alone. And Eat at Home is our joint big virtual dugnad. So I know that we can change the decade that lies ahead of us. And I believe in the moment we are in, now, this fall. And I believe that we together can make this UN summit not just another summit, but a turning point next year. But most of all, I believe in the power of what we can achieve together. I speak to you as mayors, farmers, politicians, scientists, business leaders, chefs, investors, parents, youth, and many more groups and sectors. And what I really want to tell you is that we need you all. We need you, your ideas, your visions, your force to change, your hope, your dedication, what each and every one of you bring to the table. So folks, call your friends and your enemies, and when we shortly send you an invitation to be part of the Eat at Home party, yes, party, because we need some fun along the way, I really hope that you will accept to take part in the dugnad and to create the world we want together. Thank you.
Gunhild, thank you for your calls to action, your challenges, your views, your reflections, really inviting and challenging us all to make the vision for better food systems a reality. Also, a big thank you to all our audience members, all of you who have joined in, several thousands. Thank you so much for your comments, your contributions, your great ideas, your optimistic visions. We have work to do. Thank you also to all of our speakers. Who've contributed through their incredible wisdom and experience and visions. The pandemic has really exacerbated the many inequalities and the vulnerabilities that exist in our global food system, and we have work to do. And while we work hard to address these urgent challenges, there are also opportunities for each of us to really step back and to think about systems change for a better tomorrow. What can we do? What can you do? What can I do? What can each and every one of us do? Because we are only going to get there together. We also want to thank you once again for your contributions, and we want to hear more from you. What did you think about today's broadcast? What did you think about today's event? We'd love you to click on the feedback link in the YouTube description, or you can simply respond to the email that you're going to be receiving from us shortly. Your opinions matter because they're going to shape what we talk about. We want to hear what you want to hear more about. What are you curious about? It's going to help shape the Eat at Home and our future work. So do get in touch with us. So we thank you for everything that you are already doing and that you're going to do to drive action for change. And we hope to see you in a few months at Eat at Home to continue this vital conversation. Thank you for joining us. See you then.